So Ilya, Robert, thanks for sitting down to chat about our efforts in guiding the community.
Thank you, Greg. It's nice to be here with you and Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
So these are our educational efforts to explore new levels of depth with the C4C vision. And Ilya, you and I have talked a lot about why we do not want to just contribute to the online information overload with our offerings. Why is it essential that we focus our efforts education?
Right. I think education, and by education, we mean a deepening of knowledge that forms insights that then shifts our horizons of how we go about the world, which is different from information. You know, we can skim the web and cherry pick ideas or cherry pick phrases, which I do see a bit of at times. But a phrase or an idea needs a context. It needs a place to situate itself. Otherwise, it has no real meaning that can ground us and pull us onto something more. So the educational component of C4C I see as a vital arm of what we're doing here. And by education, what we want to do is present ideas either on Teilhard de Chardin or ideas that are consonant with his vision to help us begin to understand how science, for example, plays a part in influencing our understanding of reality, or what we might call philosophy, and how philosophy might influence our understanding of Scripture, of God, and the things of God. So I don't think we can, as we know, we're in this huge paradigm shift. So I hear this now spoken by more and more people, a paradigm being a set of data or a worldview, a way we see ourselves and God and the things of God in the world. And that paradigm is shifting, but it's shifting precisely because we live in a scientific technological age that is changing our whole understanding of reality. And the last, you might say, the last child to get on board this moving train is religion or theology or the church. And there's sometimes a resistance to changing theology or to changing our basic understanding of religion. And people feel, well, God instituted these laws and God wrote the Bible and, you know, it's fixed. And that is just a misunderstanding of what religion's about and certainly what God is about. So the educational component offers courses that will help gather ideas, concepts, meaningful frameworks that we can deepen, you might say, how we know ourselves and how we know God and the things of God in the world, and begin to shift, you know, so that theology becomes, you know, the reflection on belief in a living God. The practice of religion becomes the practice of faith in a living God, a God who is at home in a world of change, a God who's at home in a world of complexity and chaos, a God who is doing new things.
That's interesting. So it's not just about wanting to avoid just another piece of information on the internet out in the ether or all these ideas, but it's about getting them to live the experience of these ideas, internalizing them and living into them in a way that maybe you can't just get without the depth of a course and without the depth of a back and forth relationship.
Exactly, because, you know, a course does provide, and that word depth is important here. It is not just gleaning ideas, you know, like going to Costco and picking out tomatoes and, you know, rubber tires and batteries and a glass of wine. It's not just pulling these ideas and putting them all together. That's just random information or random stuff. And what we lack is a depth of reflection, which is what I think education invites us to. So that as we pull these ideas into concepts, into frameworks of meaning, we can reflect on them more deeply. We can begin to ingest them, take them in, and see how they affect our other areas of knowledge. And that, I think, is the beginning of real transformation.
Yeah, the depth of reflection Robert, it makes me think about the wonderful QA series that you write for the website. And I want to chat about the kind of questions you tend to receive and why you think what you're doing for us is essential. You know, what you think you're up to when you're answering some of these questions. What are you trying to get at and help folks with?
Good question. Thank you, Greg. Primarily, many of the questions that I receive are questions that are siphoned through these old paradigms that Ilya is mentioning. In other words, they're coming from a place of attempting at an integration that has not yet been fully done. What is love, for instance? I get often, and it's understood, the question is contextualized in such a way where it's rooted in a specific verse of scripture, but it's not necessarily taken through any particular understanding of theology. And it's certainly not taken care of through the lens of relational holism as revealed by the new science either. So what I'm trying to do in my responses is trying to answer these in such a way where they reflect the importance of integrative thinking in a global interdependent world, where the lines of communication are many, but the thinking is often very siloed. And so breaking that open and understanding how spirituality begins not only with a depth, that's an eventuality, but it begins with an intellectual synthesis first, which is the heart and core of spirituality. It's a starting point, and as it's deepened, then it becomes no longer just knowledge, but wisdom. And that's, I think, the heart and core of what I'm trying to do.
Well said. So part of avoiding those silos, I think, is also what you and Jillian are about with our introductory course that we offer at C4C. Tell us a little bit about that course and how that works.
Well, the course is a phenomenal opportunity for persons who are seeking just to do that, deepen their knowledge and enhance their spiritual growth. And what we're trying to attempt to do is show that science, in a very real way, is the compass point of our spirituality in the 21st century. When we try to know Christ, unlike what we do in terms of the old traditional way, we're no longer understanding Christ as merely an object of faith, a static, fixed entity that's somehow embedded in a reality that's no longer our reality. Rather, we're trying to understand Christ in terms of what Ramon Panikar calls a third eye, an inner experience of reality, of all reality, of our reality. And that inner experience is deepened and understood through seeking through experiences that comport with spiritual needs of right now and needs that have yet to come. So we're ideally every time interpreting the essential characteristics of Teilhard de Chardin's message in concert with Ramon Panikar's third eye or Christophany experience anew every time we offer this. So in other words, when I say anew, we're taking those essential characteristics of both in one hand, and in the other hand, we're looking to the cultural needs. How have they shifted? How have they worsened? How have they even bettered in some degree? And we're integrating those and showing persons how an experience of Christ must resonate with those very experiences of the time.
Another way that we've tried to convey this depth and allow people to have this lived experience of the vision is through the webinar series. And there's been so many different topics, so many different areas covered. What do you think the importance is of the webinar series to our educational efforts with the community?
Yeah, I think the webinars serve a similar purpose as Robert is describing for the course, the introductory course. They allow focused topics to be expanded by someone who is working in the area or has, spent time thinking through the particular topic so that we get a sense of deepened knowledge. One of the things as Robert was talking, I think one of the difficulties, because people are seeking, a deepening of knowledge and a new knowledge for a new world, but we don't have other things here. In other words, we don't have symbols that help this new knowledge take root in us. We don't have new myths. We don't have new narratives. A lot of religion is based on myth and narrative and symbol, as we well know. And that's why the stories of, the Bible are so inscribed in us. Now, as we're shifting to a new paradigm, a new religious paradigm, a new cosmotheandric paradigm, to use Panikar's term here, we have what are the symbols that help us, allow this reality to take root in our lives? So the webinars deepen the knowledge. They help, again, provide some new insights, some new language as people are trying to get their heads around the shifting concepts of God, world, human person, earth, communities. And I think, as we continue with the webinars, and also they also allow people to ask questions because, again, Robert, I think might have pointed to this, that, people are coming in with a longing, a deep thirst for a new understanding, but they have a lot of questions because they're coming out of the old paradigms. And so they only know what they know, and that it's no fault of anyone. That is how, in a sense, human evolution works. We struggle through where we are as we grope or grapple or test out the new waters of meaning and understanding and symbol systems and emerge into something new. It's just the difficulty in our own age is that technology is on a very rapid exponential growth. And so it's developing us at a speed we can't quite catch our breath, as other systems like religion and human meaning systems, as these are trying to change as well. And so it's how can we use technology, part of the webinars, right? How do we use technology to advance our human meaning systems, which is what we're trying to do. We're not just breathlessly going with technology, we're using technology to catch our breath so that we can shape technology and human becoming in a more focused and positive way for the good of the Earth community, the planetary community.
I think there's that need, every questioning is a questing. There's a sense of longing that I'm hearing from both of you and what we're seeing in the community, whether it's in the courses, whether it's in the Q&A, the questions that come into the website, the questions that we receive in the webinars with you, Ilya, and others. But there's also that need, as you just said, for space, right? The questioning is a pause, right? You're not just moving forward constantly. You have to allow your mind to open. And doing that can be a back and forth, vulnerable, sometime a long-term project. And so part of this is allowing that space for people to pause and rethink what they've thought all these years.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at questions as disruptors in some ways, right? They disrupt our normal, like if I have my story of Jesus, a question might disrupt that story. And then I have to, as you say, Greg, I have to pause and say, well, what do I believe? And how is this belief now being challenged by what I'm hearing from science and technology and Raymond Panikar and other world religions? And so the disruption, therefore, becomes, it can, if we allow the openness of our knowing minds and hearts to be open to new knowledge. That's the key. So the key to new paradigms is not some conceptual thing. It's us, Are we open to changing our ideas? Are we open to rethinking God and world in entirely new ways? And that's the beauty of this invitation. It's that the webinar is an invitation to be disrupted, to pause in what you know, to be open to what you don't know, and maybe to reform your ideas in a way you never thought you would know. And therefore, we begin to move into new structures of meaning and new paradigms.
It's great. Disruption is something that people think about so negatively, as if it's just a cessation or an irritation. But the car can't take the turn right without slowing down. Also, it's going to fly off the road. And we need to be willing to live with disruption, a little bit of chaos, to be adaptive. Robert, I know it's a question that you hear often in the Q&A and in the course, is an understanding of divine love that's not simply, and Ilya, all the time, you receive this too. It's not simply some sort of romantic or Pollyannish comfort No, our God wants us to be disrupted, right? We need to be able to go with the flow. And I think that's an important part of what I hear you saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole incarnation is a giant disruption. It cut in. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? This isn't how it's supposed to be. And that's the whole thing about Christianity. It's the religion that's not supposed to be this way, right? God's not supposed to be this way. Like, what kind of God is this who gets involved in this messy world? What kind of God is this who would allow the son to go into criminals and then die on a death on a cross? I mean, really, seriously, this can't be the real God, And it's a disruptive love because it moves us out of our comfort zones and says, no, we're not finished. God is not finished. We're becoming something new. And therefore, the one who can live with disruption lives with the eruption of new life, emergence. And there's the beauty of it.
I know from you, Ilya, learning from you about Teilhard, that it's a disruptive love. It's also a converging love. And I'm excited to announce in this video that next year, we're going to be launching a print publication called Convergence. It's a biannual publication. It's going to be released in June and December, beginning in 2022, with the goal of deepening the understanding of C4C's vision at the theological, sacramental, practical, and communal levels. So, Ilya, why convergence? What is convergent in our time?
Well, that word convergence, as the way Teilhard used the word, is that if we look over this expanse of biological evolution and human evolution in particular, we realize that we never stay in a partial isolated state. Cells don't stay partially isolated. Human species don't stay partially. They keep moving towards something more relational, more complex in the relationships. And so there is a convergence that Teilhard thought is due largely in part to consciousness. As consciousness itself becomes more materialized, material conscious entities become more relationalized. And so we're moving towards a type of unity which is not a collapse of everything into some amorphous glob, but actually it's the differentiation of every entity in its true relational beingness. So that, the unity up ahead, it's sort of like if you could take the internet as an example, we have now entered into a global consciousness. We know about this planet. It has shrunk precisely because we know it in a whole new level. But imagine that shrinking this planet into all life, that we know our brothers and sisters in the Sudan and they're suffering and they're part of our suffering now. And we have to, in a sense, share our resources. We can't keep using water and we can't keep using, minerals and fossil fuels just because it's good for us. I think a shift in consciousness, a planetization of consciousness, which is what Teilhard thought by convergence, the planetization of conscious beingness, that we can move toward a type of new personhood, what he called the terrestrian, not just a human person, but a terrestrian who is, who belongs to this planet because they belong to God and they belong to one another and to the things of the earth. And therefore it's beyond our imagination. I think we're too small in our imagination. We're too small in what we hope for. We're like, gee, I hope I get through tomorrow, get to next week and, just get rid of this conflict here. And we're kind of like putting out fires all the time. Like, oh God, we just got through that little, and it's terrible because every fire just seems to be igniting a bigger fire. And we're not using that warmth of the fire to move to something new together, to be forged like iron into something new together. So all this to say, and I want to just put a word, that Robert and Jillian are doctoral students and they're what generation are you, Z or Y or Z, or you're in those upcoming generations that I've lost count on the alphabet of what they are. But, what we're saying is, this is our future, to have young thinkers, young evolutionary minded thinkers, means that there's hope for God. God's not a hopeless God. God is God of hope because we can become something new, and we need thinkers and shapers of the world of tomorrow. And so I'm happy to see, and I know Greg is a theologian as well. And when we convert him fully, then, he too will, and he is in his own way. So I'm very, very grateful for your work, both of you, in the way you're helping this world move forward.
You fill me full of hope. This message of planetary convergence, even if sometimes it feels disruptive, even if sometimes it feels scary, because that's how God's creation sometimes works, fills me full of hope. To have the opportunity to listen in on Robert and Jillian's amazing course, to read Robert's Q&A, these fill me full of hope. So for me, C4C is a place of hope. Not a place of hope that's just going to tell you everything's just going to be fine, but a place of hope that says, this is what we mean when we say things like God's plan. Not that this is completely all worked out, but how this is working is the plan.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not a Pollyannish hope, right? It's not a pie in the sky hope. It's not some platonic hope like, oh God, when we get to heaven, things will be better. It's a hope that says, I am scared. I am worried about this earth. I'm worried because I know this is not the fullness of life, and we have the capacity for more. And so the worry is a good thing to have, because we refuse to settle for the fragmentation and the divisiveness of our age. We refuse to settle for, ecological greed, that we say, no, we can become something new. We can become something new together. And Teilhard says, yes, we can, because there is a power of love here that's at the heart of this life, and it will not rest until it rests in us.
Wonderful. I would just say to people at home on that, bring your hopes, bring your fears, bring your desire for something more to the website, to these courses, to the webinars, to the Q&A. And it's our pleasure to be part of this process with you. Ilya, Robert, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Robert.